When a young woman witnesses a government massacre and is forced to marry the Apache scout who led soldiers to the village, she doesn't realize the marriage certificate has already redefined her as the architect of the crime. This isn't a story about love conquering deception. It's about two people discovering that their union was designed to make them both guilty of murder. Arizona Territory, 1871. Emma Fairchild learned she would marry in the same breath she learned 23 Apache women and children had been killed at Aravaipa Creek. 24 years old. Pale hair kept in a severe knot. Green eyes that had witnessed what no clerk's daughter should see. Hands that had spent 3 months documenting supply requisitions for Camp Grant, now shaking so badly she couldn't hold a pen. Colonel Bernard de Silva delivered the news in his office, positioned so she had to squint against the afternoon sun while his face remained in shadow. The marriage will be announced tomorrow. You and the scout, Nietzsche. It's already been approved by the territorial court. I don't understand. Emma's voice came out smaller than she intended. What marriage? You've been corresponding with him for months, De Silva said, sliding a leather portfolio across the desk. Love letters, quite detailed, discussing tribal movements, village locations. You shared intelligence that helped him identify hostile elements threatening settler safety. Emma opened the portfolio. Her handwriting, her signature. Letters she'd never written describing Apache positions, water sources, seasonal camps. Each one dated, stamped, filed in official correspondence logs. I never wrote these. The court has authenticated them, De Silva continued. Your handwriting analysis was performed by a federal examiner. The letters are genuine. They're forgeries. They're evidence. De Silva's voice hardened. Evidence that could be interpreted very badly for you. A civilian clerk who provided intelligence resulting in a military action could be seen as complicit, especially if that intelligence was motivated by personal involvement with a native scout rather than patriotic duty. The room tilted. Emma gripped the desk edge. What military action? The pacification at Aravaipa Creek yesterday morning. 23 hostiles eliminated. Your letters helped Nietzsche guide our forces to the correct location. He paused. Or rather, they would help him, if he'd actually written back. If there was correspondence on both sides. If this was a mutual exchange, rather than you acting alone. Understanding crashed down like cold water. You're saying I'm responsible. I'm saying the documents suggest a narrative. De Silva leaned forward. Love-struck clerk provides classified information to native scout she's obsessed with. Intelligence is used to plan attack. Attack succeeds. Now clerk needs protection from scandal and possible prosecution. Marriage provides that protection. Makes you his wife. Subject to different legal jurisdiction. Harder to testify against each other. Those people at Aravaipa... Emma's throat closed. She'd seen the supply manifests. Flour, blankets, children's shoes. A peaceful camp receiving government rations. They weren't hostile. They were farming. They had permission to be there. That's a matter of military assessment, De Silva said. The point is, you need this marriage. The alternative is investigation, trial, possible conviction for providing intelligence that resulted in civilian deaths. The territorial courts are very interested in examples they can make. Nietzsche would never agree to this. Nietzsche already has. De Silva pulled out another document. Marriage petition, signed with an X mark. He came to me 3 weeks ago, requesting permission to marry you. Said you'd been corresponding, that he wanted to formalize the relationship before your contract ended, and you returned east. 3 weeks ago. Before Aravaipa. Before the massacre she'd witnessed from the ridge while delivering supply reports, too far away to stop it, but close enough to see everything. Close enough to recognize that the Apache camp had been marked with white flags of truce. That soldiers had fired on unarmed women. That children had been killed trying to run. Close enough to be the only civilian witness to what had actually happened. He's lying, Emma said. I barely know him. He guides supply wagons sometimes, that's all. We've never... The court has his petition, your letters. A consistent narrative spanning months. De Silva's expression was almost sympathetic. Miss Fairchild, you have two choices. Marry Nietzsche tomorrow and let this matter settle quietly as a private affair. Or refuse, and face formal charges for unauthorized disclosure of military intelligence, resulting in the deaths of enemy combatants who were, according to some interpretations, under government protection. They were under protection. You know they were. I processed the safe passage documents myself. Documents that could be read to suggest you knew exactly where to find them, De Silva said softly. You see the problem. Emma saw the trap, saw how neatly she'd been positioned. The only witness to wrongdoing now transformed into its perpetrator. Marriage would seal it, make her complicit, guilty by association and law, bound to silence by wifely duty and self-preservation. What does Nietzsche think he's getting from this? Emma asked. Protection, presumably. Marriage to a white woman gives him certain privileges. Access to civilian courts. Property rights. He's calculating that being your husband is better than being your co-conspirator. But something didn't make sense. Emma had seen Nietzsche's face when the supply wagon he was guiding passed the Aravaipa camp the week before the attack. Had seen him speak to the women there, hand over extra flour from his own rations. Had seen the gentleness in how he'd touched a child's head. He wouldn't have guided soldiers to murder those people. Wouldn't have participated in that. Unless he'd been manipulated too. I'll sign, Emma said. But I want to speak to him first. That can be arranged, De Silva replied. Though I'd caution against discussing the details of your correspondence too openly. Wouldn't want inconsistencies to emerge. Translation: don't compare stories. Don't realize you've both been lied to. Emma signed the certificate, her hand steady now. Because if this was a trap, the only way out was through. 12 miles south, Nietzsche learned his future had been sealed by documents he'd never touched and promises he'd never made. The military liaison, Lieutenant Morrison, delivered the news at the civilian scouts camp with the casual brutality of a man following orders. Congratulations, you're getting married tomorrow. Emma Fairchild from the supply office. You requested it 3 weeks ago. Nietzsche set down the bridle he'd been mending. I made no request. You signed a petition. I have it here. Morrison produced a paper. X mark at the bottom. Close to Nietzsche's signature, but not quite right. The downstroke too heavy, the angle slightly off. That is not my mark. A federal clerk authenticated it. Morrison's tone suggested this conversation was a formality. Apparently you've been writing to Miss Fairchild for months. Love letters, planning marriage. The territorial court approved it. She's agreed. Everything's arranged. I have written no letters to anyone. Really? Morrison's expression shifted to something uglier. Because she has copies. Detailed descriptions of tribal movements you supposedly shared with her. Information about Apache camps, water sources, patrol patterns. Information that was used yesterday at Aravaipa Creek. Nietzsche went very still. I had no part in Aravaipa. The letters say otherwise. They establish that you've been corresponding with a white woman, sharing intelligence, planning attacks. That yesterday's action was based on information you provided through your relationship. I provided nothing. I knew nothing of that attack until after. Then you'll want to marry Miss Fairchild very quickly, Morrison said. Because if you don't, the alternative interpretation is that you were feeding intelligence to a civilian clerk who took unauthorized action resulting in the deaths of peaceful Apache under government protection. You'd hang for that. The trap closed like jaws. Nietzsche had been away from camp during the Aravaipa attack, guiding a supply wagon north. But he'd been assigned that route by Morrison himself. Timing that now seemed deliberate. While he was away, soldiers had murdered people he knew. People who'd trusted the white flag, trusted the safe passage, trusted that surrender meant survival. And now someone had forged documents making him look like he'd helped plan it. The woman, Emma Fairchild. She asked for this marriage? Eagerly, Morrison said. She's facing prosecution for providing intelligence to native scouts. Marriage to you protects her legally, makes the correspondence private rather than criminal. Smart woman. She saw a way out and took it. Nietzsche thought of the pale clerk, who processed supply requisitions with meticulous care. Who'd once returned overpayment on a voucher he'd submitted. walking 3 miles to ensure he wasn't cheated. Who'd blushed and looked away the one time their hands had touched passing papers. That woman had orchestrated this, had manufactured letters to frame him, then arranged marriage to escape consequences. Why would she do this? Guilt, probably. Or calculation. Maybe both. Morrison shrugged. Point is, she did. And now you either marry her and let this settle as private business, or you both face charges that will destroy you. The army doesn't want the publicity. The territorial government doesn't want the scandal. Marriage makes everyone's problems go away. Except mine. You'll be married to a white woman. That's privilege most scouts never get. Property rights, access to civilian courts, better rations. You could do worse. Nietzsche could do worse. He could be hanged for a massacre he didn't commit based on evidence he didn't create. He could watch his name become synonymous with betrayal among his own people. He could die knowing he'd been used as a weapon against those he'd tried to protect. Or he could marry a woman he didn't know, who'd apparently framed him, and survive long enough to understand why. I will marry her, Nietzsche said. But I want to see these letters first. Denied. They're evidence in a closed investigation. You'll get copies after the marriage is finalized. Morrison stood. Ceremonies tomorrow at noon. Civilian chaplain. Be there, or be arrested. Your choice. After he left, Nietzsche sat in the growing darkness and thought about the trap that had been built around him. Someone had created false correspondence between him and the clerk. Someone had timed his absence during the Aravaipa attack. Someone had positioned them both as perpetrators of a massacre they'd actually witnessed as separate, innocent parties. The question was, why? What did someone gain from forcing this marriage beyond covering up the massacre? And the deeper question, did Emma Fairchild know she was bait in a trap meant to catch them both? Or was she, like him, a victim being repositioned as criminal? Tomorrow he'd find out. When they stood together and bound themselves in a marriage designed to make them both guilty of murder. The ceremony occurred in the civilian chapel at Camp Grant, witnessed by 3 soldiers and a court clerk. Emma wore the same brown dress she wore to work. Nietzsche wore Scout's clothing mixed with traditional Apache elements, a choice that felt like defiance even if he couldn't articulate exactly what he was defying. The chaplain looked deeply uncomfortable. Do you, Emma Fairchild, take this man? Yes. Get it done. And do you, Nietzsche, take this woman? Yes. One word. Cold as stone. By the authority granted me by the territory of Arizona. Finished. Married. Bound by law to someone who either betrayed him or was betrayed alongside him. Nietzsche couldn't tell which, and Emma's face gave nothing away. Colonel De Silva approached as witnesses dispersed. Your quarters are in the civilian housing section. Cabin 12. Your belongings have been moved, Miss Fairchild. Mrs. Nietzsche, I should say. I want to see the letters, Emma said. The ones I supposedly wrote. After you've settled in. Military protocols, you understand. De Silva turned to Nietzsche. You're reassigned from scout duty. Effective immediately, you'll work as civilian labor. Construction, maintenance, regular wages. Your wife will continue in the supply office, though with modified duties. Translation. Watched constantly. Controlled completely. The cabin was small. Single room, basic furniture, sleeping area separated by a canvas partition. Emma's ledgers and clothing in neat crates. Nietzsche's few possessions already arranged by someone else's hand. They stood in the space like strangers forced into a cell together. Which, Emma realized, was exactly what they were. Did you write those letters? Nietzsche asked finally. His English was precise, careful. No. Did you sign that petition? No. They looked at each other. Understanding arrived like dawn. Slow, then all at once. We've been framed, Emma said. By the same person, for the same crime. Nietzsche moved to the window, checking sightlines. The question is why? To hide what happened at Aravaipa, Emma said. I was there, on the ridge. I saw everything. Nietzsche turned slowly. You witnessed it? I was delivering supply reports. I saw soldiers fire on unarmed women. Saw children killed trying to flee. Saw the white flags ignored. Her voice shook. It was murder. Deliberate. Planned murder. I knew some of them, Nietzsche said quietly. The families at Aravaipa. They'd surrendered in good faith. They were farming, taking rations, trying to survive. He paused. I was deliberately sent away that morning. Morrison assigned me to guide supplies north. When I returned, I heard what happened. So we're both witnesses. And now we're both perpetrators. Your letters establish motive and planning. My supposed cooperation establishes method. Together, we form a complete narrative of guilt. Emma's mind raced through the implications. The marriage binds us legally, makes us unable to testify against each other easily, creates shared interest in keeping quiet. And if we speak out anyway, Nietzsche continued, we're confessing to the crime we're being accused of planning. The trap was elegant, brutal, perfect. Who benefits? Emma asked. Whoever ordered the massacre, Nietzsche replied. Whoever wanted Aravaipa eliminated and needed someone to blame if questions were asked. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay behind the canvas partition, listening to Nietzsche moving quietly in the main room, and thought about the documents that had reshaped reality around her. Her handwriting, her signature, her words describing Apache movements and suggesting military action. All forgery, but authenticated by federal examiners who'd confirmed the writing was genuinely hers. How had they done it? Copied from requisition forms she signed daily? Studied her hand until they could replicate it perfectly? And why go to such elaborate lengths unless what they were hiding was worth the effort? 23 dead at Aravaipa. 23 witnesses to surrender eliminated. 23 pieces of evidence destroyed. Emma had processed the safe passage documents herself 3 weeks before the attack, had filed the promises of protection, had documented the rations being sent to peaceful Apache who'd agreed to settle, farm, stop fighting. Someone had ordered them killed anyway, and now Emma and Nietzsche were being positioned as the reason why. In the main room, Nietzsche sat by the dying fire and calculated survival. The marriage made him vulnerable in new ways: property, legal status, everything now tied to a white woman who might still be part of the deception. But her reaction during their conversation had seemed genuine. Fear, confusion, anger, hard to fake. And if she was truly another victim, then they might have something rarer than innocence. They might have alliance. Morning came gray and cold. Emma found Nietzsche already awake, making coffee over the fire with the same precision he apparently brought to everything. I need to see the forged letters, Emma said. And you need to see the petition you supposedly signed. We can't fight what we don't understand. De Silva won't allow it. The documents are evidence in a closed investigation. Then we open the investigation, Emma replied. There has to be someone in the territorial government who'd listen. Someone who cares about truth more than convenience. You're assuming anyone with power wants the truth, Nietzsche said. What happened at Aravaipa is profitable for some people. Land opened for settlement. Apache scared into compliance. Military demonstrating strength. Truth threatens all of that. He was right. Emma had seen enough of territorial politics to know that justice was whatever served those with guns and money. Then what do we do? Just accept being blamed for murder? Nietzsche poured coffee, handed her a cup. We find out who forged the documents. We trace who benefits from the massacre. We build evidence that proves we're not responsible. And if we can't, then we run, or we die fighting the accusation, but we don't surrender. Emma nodded. It was a plan built on air and hope, but it was something. I can access supply office records, see who requisitioned materials for Aravaipa before the attack. If someone was planning it, there might be paper trails. I can talk to other scouts, find out who knew about the attack before it happened, who gave the orders. They were quiet for a moment, drinking bitter coffee and contemplating investigation that would likely get them both killed. Why did you agree to this marriage? Emma asked. You could have refused, faced charges. And accomplished nothing while dying, Nietzsche replied. This way, at least I have time to discover who used my name to kill people I knew, to make them pay for that. Even if making them pay destroys you? Especially then. Nietzsche met her eyes. What about you? Why agree? Because I watch children die, Emma said quietly. Because someone needs to be held accountable. and because refusing would have meant giving up before the fight started. Something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. Two people trapped in the same cell, deciding whether to turn on each other or face the door together. "We should establish rules," Emma said, "for this arrangement." "Such as?" "Honesty. About everything related to this situation. We can't work together if we're hiding things from each other." "Agreed. What else?" "Respect for the space. We're forced to live together, but that doesn't mean—" Emma stopped, unsure how to phrase it. "I will not touch you," Nietzsche said bluntly. "The marriage is paper, not reality. You need not fear me in that way." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you. And you will not report my movements to De Silva or Morrison or anyone else. Whatever you learn about me, about Apache business, stays private." "I would never—" Emma caught herself. "Yes, I agree." They were silent again. The fire crackled. Outside, the camp was waking. Soldiers drilling, horses being fed, the daily machinery of military occupation grinding forward. "I have to report to the supply office," Emma said finally. "De Silva said I have modified duties now." "Modified how?" "I don't know yet, but I suspect it means monitored closely and given access to nothing sensitive. They'll be watching you, looking for signs you're investigating. Then I'll be very careful." Emma set down her cup. "What will you do?" "Construction work, apparently. Building the new officers' quarters." Nietzsche's expression was carefully neutral. "Also being watched, no doubt." "Then we're both prisoners pretending to be free." "Yes, but prisoners can still gather intelligence, can still plan escape." Emma met his eyes, saw determination there, and something that might have been respect. "Can prisoners become allies?" "We're about to find out," Nietzsche replied. The supply office felt different now. Emma walked in to find her desk moved from its corner position to the center of the room, visible from all angles. Her access logs showed restrictions. Certain files marked unavailable, requisition forms requiring additional approval. Lieutenant Morrison appeared within minutes. "Mrs. Nietzsche, how does married life suit you?" "It's been less than a day." "Still quite a change. You'll find your duties adjusted to reflect your new status. Less sensitive work, more administrative filing. We wouldn't want you overwhelmed." Translation: You're being demoted, watched, and stripped of access to information. "I understand," Emma said. "Excellent. Oh, and Colonel De Silva would like weekly reports on your husband's activities. Where he goes, who he speaks with. Simple domestic observations. You can submit them to me." There it was. The real purpose of the marriage from their perspective. Not just to neutralize Emma as a witness, but to position her as an informant on her own husband. "What kind of observations are you looking for?" "Anything unusual. Contact with unauthorized Apache. Discussions of tribal matters. Signs of disloyalty." Emma kept her face blank. "I'll prepare reports as requested." After Morrison left, Emma began the tedious work of filing yesterday's requisitions. But she was also watching, noting which files were now restricted. Who came and went from the office. What conversations happened when people thought she wasn't listening. And she was thinking about the forged letters. About how someone had replicated her handwriting so perfectly. About who had access to documents she'd signed. The answer was, almost everyone. Requisition forms, supply reports, personnel records. Her signature was all over camp documentation. Anyone with access to those files could have studied her hand. Could have practiced until they could forge it. But perfect forgery required skill. Which meant someone trained in documentation, copying, record-keeping. Someone like Miss Fairchild. Sorry, Mrs. Nietzsche. The supply clerk, Patterson, approached nervously. "I need approval on these requisitions. But Lieutenant Morrison said you can't authorize anything over $20 now." Emma looked at the forms. Flour, blankets, medical supplies, all standard. All under her previous authorization threshold. now requiring Morrison's signature instead. "I'll pass them along," Emma said. Patterson hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Privately?" Emma glanced around. They were alone for the moment. Quickly. "Did you really write those letters? The ones about Aravaipa?" Patterson's voice was barely audible. "Because I saw them. Morrison had me file copies. And something about the handwriting was wrong." Emma's heart started racing. "Wrong how?" "Too perfect, like someone copied it rather than wrote naturally. I've filed hundreds of your forms. I know your hand. Those letters were close but not quite right." Patterson looked terrified. "I didn't say anything because, well, but if you didn't write them, someone went to a lot of trouble to make it look like you did." This was it. The first crack in the manufactured narrative. "Can you get me copies? Are you insane? Morrison would have me court-martialed. What if I could prove they were forgeries? What if that proof protected both of us?" Patterson shook his head. "I have a family. I can't risk it." "Then just tell me. Who had access to my signature samples? Who could have studied my handwriting long enough to forge it?" "Anyone in this office. Anyone with access to personnel files." Patterson paused. "But if I had to guess? The clerks who process official correspondence. They handle document authentication, copying, archival. They'd have both the skill and the access. Names? I can't—" "Patterson." Emma kept her voice level. 23 people died at Aravaipa. If we let whoever ordered that massacre hide behind forgeries, those deaths mean nothing. Please." Patterson looked miserable. "Harris, Chief Correspondence Clerk. He handles all official document copying for the territorial government. Reports directly to Governor Safford's office, not military command. If anyone could forge documents that would pass authentication, it's him." Emma filed that name away. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't get me killed." That evening, Emma told Nietzsche what she'd learned. They sat at the small table, speaking quietly, knowing their cabin might not be private. "A government clerk," Nietzsche said thoughtfully. "Not military. That suggests this goes beyond Camp Grant. Beyond just covering up one massacre." "What if Aravaipa wasn't the goal?" Emma asked. "What if it was just leverage?" "Explain." "Think about it. They needed Apache eliminated from that area. But they also needed a story that would justify it. So they create false correspondence between us, forge documents suggesting we planned it together, then force us into marriage that makes us look guilty." Emma leaned forward. "But why go to such lengths? Why not just claim military necessity and be done with it?" "Because military necessity can be challenged," Nietzsche replied. "If territorial courts or federal investigators look closely, they might find the attack unjustified. But if it was civilians who provided intelligence, if it was a white woman and an Apache scout working together, then it's not military policy, it's personal betrayal. Different kind of crime, different jurisdiction." "And easier to bury," Emma finished. "Frame us, marry us, make us both legally compromised. Then if anyone asks questions, the answer is already prepared. Someone planned this very carefully. Someone with access to government resources. Someone who could forge documents, manipulate military assignments, arrange marriages through territorial courts." Emma paused. "Someone more powerful than a camp colonel." They were quiet, contemplating enemies they couldn't yet name operating from positions they couldn't reach. "I need to talk to Harris," Emma said, "the correspondence clerk. See if I can learn anything about how the letters were created. He'll be watching for that. If you approach him directly, he'll report it. Then I need to be subtle. Maybe I can request copies of old requisition forms, claim I need them for some administrative purpose. Get him talking about document processing, authentication procedures." Nietzsche nodded slowly. "I'll talk to the other scouts. See if any of them noticed unusual activity before Aravaipa. Someone had to guide those soldiers. If it wasn't me, then who?" It was a plan. Fragile, dangerous, probably insufficient. But it was movement forward instead of drowning in manufactured guilt. "Nietzsche," Emma said hesitantly. "Thank you for believing me. You could have assumed I was lying, that I really did write those letters." I could have, Nietzsche agreed. But I watched your face when you first saw the letters mentioned. You were genuinely shocked. Fear and confusion are difficult to fake convincingly. You were analyzing me? I've spent years learning to read faces, gestures, what people don't say. He met her eyes. It's how you survive among enemies. And you are not enemy. Not yet, anyway. Not yet, Emma echoed. It was the most honest thing either of them could offer. Outside, the camp settled into evening routines. Somewhere, people who'd orchestrated murder were sleeping soundly. Somewhere, the truth was documented in files Emma couldn't access and testimony she couldn't compel. But she and Nietzsche were still alive, still free enough to investigate, still dangerous enough to matter. For now, that would have to be enough. The next morning, Emma requested a meeting with Harris under the pretense of needing archived requisition forms for an audit De Silva had supposedly ordered. It was a thin excuse, but thin was all she had. Harris was exactly what Emma expected. Pale, meticulous, with ink-stained fingers and the careful posture of someone who spent their life bent over documents. His office was in the Civilian Administration Building, separated from military operations by institutional walls that were simultaneously porous and impenetrable. Mrs. Nietzsche. Harris didn't look up from the form he was transcribing. What can I do for you? I need copies of supply requisitions from February and March. Colonel De Silva is conducting an audit, wants everything cross-referenced. Which requisitions specifically? Emma had prepared for this. All non-military procurement, civilian contracts, Apache rations, construction materials, anything not directly related to troop maintenance. Harris finally looked up. His eyes were cold, assessing. That's 3 months of documentation. Hundreds of forms. I can wait while you pull them. It will take days. I'll have to send a requisition to the Territorial Archives. He picked up his pen again, dismissing her. Check back next week. I really need them sooner, Colonel's orders. Then the Colonel can requisition them through proper channels. I don't take orders from supply clerks, regardless of who they've married. The insult was calculated. Emma pushed down anger and tried a different approach. I'm sorry to be difficult. It's just, this audit is making everyone nervous. Apparently there are questions about document authenticity. Something about signatures not matching official samples. Harris's hand paused mid-stroke. What kind of questions? I don't know the details. Just that some requisition forms are being challenged. The Colonel wants everything verified against original signatures to prove legitimacy. It was a shot in darkness, but Emma watched Harris carefully. Saw the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightening of his jaw. Signatures are authenticated through standard protocols, Harris said carefully. Federal examiners compare against archived samples. The process is thorough. But it's possible to forge, isn't it? If someone had enough samples to study? Technically, yes. But why would anyone forge requisition forms? They're not financial instruments. There's no profit in it. What about other documents? Emma asked. Letters, personal correspondence. Could those be forged using the same techniques? Harris set down his pen very deliberately. Mrs. Nietzsche, is there something specific you're trying to ask me? Emma met his eyes. Saw calculation there, and something that might have been fear. I'm trying to understand how document authentication works. That's all. Then I suggest you request a manual from the Territorial Records Office. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to complete. Of course. Thank you for your time. Emma left, her mind racing. Harris had been nervous, had reacted to questions about signature forgery with more tension than the conversation warranted. He knew something. Or had done something. Or both. She needed to get into his office, see what records he kept, find evidence of the forgeries that had framed her and Nietzsche. But civilian administration was monitored even more carefully than military spaces. She couldn't just break in. She needed a reason, an excuse, something that would give her legitimate access. Meanwhile, Nietzsche was having his own conversations. The scout barracks were being dismantled, another efficiency measure that displaced the Apache scouts from communal space into smaller, more easily monitored cabins. Nietzsche worked alongside the construction crew, demolishing the old buildings and listened. "Heard you got married, Miguel," another scout commented while pulling nails from boards. The white clerk. "Yes. Morrison says you asked for it. Says you wanted white wife for status." "Morrison says many things." Miguel glanced around, making sure they weren't overheard. "Some of us don't believe him. We know you. Know you wouldn't ask for something like that." Nietzsche continued working, waiting. "There's talk," Miguel continued carefully, "about Aravaipa, about how convenient it was that you were away, that the one scout who knew those families best wasn't there to warn them. I was assigned north, supply run. Assigned by Morrison, who doesn't usually handle scout logistics." Miguel pulled another nail. "And the soldiers who went to Aravaipa, they had Apache guide, someone who knew the terrain, but none of us can figure out who. Whoever it was isn't talking about it." "Someone is hiding," Nietzsche said. "Or someone is dead." Miguel's voice dropped even lower. 3 scouts went missing after Aravaipa. "Transferred," Morrison said. "But no one saw them leave. No one knows where they went. 3 scouts, missing or dead. Potential witnesses eliminated or silenced." "Names?" Nietzsche asked. "Vicente. Thomas. Red Sky." Miguel paused. Thomas was supposed to guide supply run that week, but Morrison reassigned him at the last minute. Put you on it instead. The pattern was becoming clear. Someone had deliberately reorganized scout assignments before Aravaipa, moved Nietzsche away, put Thomas in position to guide the attack, then made Thomas disappear afterward. "If I asked questions about Thomas," Nietzsche said carefully, "would anyone have answers?" "Depends on who's asking and why. But if someone wanted to know where bodies were buried..." Miguel met his eyes. "Old cavalry burial ground east of camp, unofficially used sometimes for things the army doesn't want questions about." Nietzsche filed that information away. "Thank you. Don't thank me, just be careful. Whatever you're mixed up in with that marriage, it's bigger than scout gossip. People are scared to talk about Aravaipa, scared in a way that's different from usual." That evening, Nietzsche told Emma what he'd learned. 3 missing scouts, unofficial burial ground, the careful reorganization of assignments that had positioned everyone exactly where they needed to be for the massacre to proceed and be blamed on the right people. "They killed their own guides," Emma said, horrified, "to cover their tracks. Thomas probably didn't know he was guiding troops to slaughter until it was happening. Afterward, he became a liability. Like we're liabilities. Except we're more useful alive as scapegoats than dead as loose ends." Nietzsche leaned back. "They need us to exist as the guilty parties, but if we push too hard, ask too many questions, we become expendable." They were quiet. The weight of what they were facing settled over them like dirt. "I need to search Harris's office," Emma said. "Find the original forgeries, or evidence of how they were created." "Impossible. The administration building is locked at night, guarded, monitored." "Then I need to get in during the day. Find an excuse that won't raise suspicion." What kind of excuse? Emma thought. Fire. If there was a fire, they'd evacuate the building. In the confusion, I could... "Get yourself killed or arrested," Nietzsche interrupted. "Starting fires near military installations is a quick way to face execution." He was right, but doing nothing meant accepting their fate as designated murderers. "Then what do you suggest?" "We need someone with legitimate access, someone who works in that building who could retrieve documents without suspicion." "Patterson," Emma said suddenly. "The supply clerk. He noticed the forgeries were wrong. He already suspects something." "Will he help?" "I don't know, but he has children. I can appeal to that. Tell him the truth, that we're being framed for murder, that helping us helps clear innocent names." Nietzsche considered this. "It's a risk. He could report the conversation." "Everything is a risk," Emma replied. "But we're running out of moves." The next day, Emma cornered Patterson in the supply office during the afternoon lull when Morrison was in meetings, and they were briefly alone. "I need to ask you for something dangerous," she said without preamble. "And you have every right to refuse." Patterson looked terrified already. "What?" I need you to go to Harris's office. Request access to archived correspondence. Say you're cross-referencing dates for requisition forms. While you're there, look for files related to Apache intelligence reports from March. Anything with my name or Nietzsche's name. If you find copies of the forged letters, I need you to bring them to me. That's insane. Harris would know immediately. Not if you do it legitimately. You have authorization to cross-reference records. You can request files without explanation. He might be suspicious, but he can't refuse an official records request. Patterson shook his head. Why would I risk my job, my safety, for something that doesn't involve me? Because 23 people died at Aravaipa, Emma said quietly. Because those deaths are being pinned on 2 innocent people to cover up what actually happened. Because if we don't expose the truth, whoever ordered that massacre will do it again. That's not my problem. It will be when they need another scapegoat. When they decide your signature or your records are convenient to forge. When your children ask why you stood by while innocent people were destroyed. It was manipulation, crude and obvious, but also true. Patterson was silent for a long moment. If I do this, if I get caught, they'll court-martial me. My family will be left without support. If you do this and we succeed, you'll have helped expose corruption that reaches the territorial government. You'll be protected by that exposure. And if we fail? Then we all pay the price, Emma admitted, but we pay it knowing we tried. Patterson closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked older. I'll need until tomorrow. Harris only files archived correspondence on Wednesdays. That's when I can request access without it seeming unusual. Tomorrow then. Thank you. Don't thank me until we see if I survive this. Wednesday arrived with spring rain that turned the camp roads to mud. Emma worked through morning requisitions with shaking hands, trying to focus while knowing Patterson was either retrieving evidence or being caught and arrested. Noon came, then 1 o'clock, 2. At 3, Patterson appeared at her desk. His face was carefully neutral, but he slid a folder under the supply manifest he was submitting for approval. Everything's in order, he said loudly. Then, quieter. Read it tonight. Return the folder tomorrow as if I forgot to file it properly. Emma's hands trembled as she took the folder. Thank you. Patterson nodded once and left. Emma forced herself to complete the rest of the day's work with normal efficiency. Filed forms, approved requisitions, acted as if nothing had changed. But the folder burned in her desk drawer like contained fire. Finally, evening. Emma walked back to the cabin with the folder hidden under her shawl, praying she wouldn't be stopped and searched. Nietzsche was already there, preparing dinner. He looked up as she entered, saw her expression, and immediately secured the door. Emma spread the contents across their table. 16 letters, all in her handwriting, all dated from January through March, all describing Apache movements, camp locations, tribal politics. All signed with her name, and all forgeries, but perfect forgeries. So perfect that Emma had to look closely to spot the slight differences Patterson had noticed, the too consistent letter spacing, the too careful formation, the absence of the small variations that came from natural writing. These are excellent, Nietzsche said, studying them. Whoever created them studied your hand extensively. Look at the dates. Emma pointed. They correspond exactly to days when I worked late in the supply office. Days when the office was empty except for me. Days when someone could have. She stopped. Understanding clicked into place. Could have what? Nietzsche asked. Could have watched me write, observed my hand in real time. Emma's voice shook. The supply office has windows facing the parade ground. If someone stood in shadow outside, they could watch me work without me seeing them. Harris? Or someone working for Harris, someone who needed to replicate my handwriting perfectly enough to fool federal examiners. Emma shuffled through the letters. And look, they're not just random intelligence, they're strategically timed. Each letter reveals information that builds toward Aravaipa, troop movements, camp locations. Finally, the specific coordinates of the surrender camp. Building a narrative, Nietzsche said. Making it look like sustained intelligence sharing rather than one isolated incident. Exactly. And the final letter? Emma pulled it out. Dated 3 days before the massacre. It specifically mentions that the camp will be vulnerable during morning rations distribution, that soldiers should strike then for maximum effect. She felt sick reading it. Sick knowing these words in her handwriting had been used to justify murdering children. There's more, Nietzsche said, pulling out a separate document from the bottom of the folder. This is the petition I supposedly signed. Look at the mark. Emma studied it. The X was close to Nietzsche's mark, but the ink was different, slightly faded, as if the document had been aged artificially. They backdated it, Nietzsche explained. Made it look like I petitioned for marriage 3 weeks before Aravaipa. That timing is important. Why? Because it establishes premeditation. If I asked to marry you 3 weeks before the attack, it suggests I was planning the whole time, that the marriage was part of the conspiracy rather than a response to it. Emma saw it now. The careful construction of guilt through temporal sequencing. Letters building to attack. Petition preceding letters. Marriage sealing both in shared culpability. Someone spent months planning this, she said. This wasn't improvised. This was architected. Which means someone very powerful ordered Aravaipa. Someone who knew questions would be asked and prepared answers in advance. They stared at the documents. Evidence of their innocence that was simultaneously evidence of massive conspiracy. We need to get these to someone who can use them, Emma said. A federal prosecutor, a territorial judge, someone outside the military chain of command. Who would believe us? Nietzsche asked. We're the accused parties. We have obvious motive to manufacture exculpatory evidence. But these aren't exculpatory. They're the original forgeries. Patterson took them from official archives. They're stamped, filed, authenticated. They're the government's evidence against us. Exactly. And showing them to anyone means revealing we stole classified documents from official files. That's another crime. Emma wanted to scream. They had proof of their innocence, and it was useless. Unless, Nietzsche said slowly, we don't show them to officials. We show them to newspapers. What? Territorial newspapers. The ones that criticize government policy. The ones that publish stories about military abuse and civilian rights. Nietzsche's voice gained intensity. We don't need courts to believe us. We need public pressure. We need articles asking questions, headlines suggesting forgery, editorials demanding investigation. Emma thought about it. The Arizona Citizen. They've published critical pieces about Camp Grant before, about ration shortages and treaty violations. Can you reach them? I could write, but how do we get the documents to them without being caught? We make copies. Keep the originals here. Send copies through civilian mail. If the mail is intercepted, we haven't technically stolen anything. Just shared information we claim to have legal access to as parties to our own marriage. It was barely legal. Probably not even that. But it was something. Emma spent that evening painstakingly copying the forged letters in her own hand. An ironic inversion. Reproducing forgeries that claimed to be her original writing. Nietzsche composed a letter to the newspaper explaining their situation, carefully worded to avoid admitting theft while revealing conspiracy. At midnight, they had a package ready. Tomorrow, Emma would mail it during her lunch hour from the civilian post office, using her own money for postage, leaving no military trail. And then they'd wait, and hope someone cared enough about truth to risk publishing it. 3 days later, Colonel De Silva summoned them both to his office. Emma's stomach turned to ice as they walked across the parade ground together. This was it. They'd been discovered. The package had been intercepted. They were about to be arrested. De Silva sat behind his desk, expression unreadable. Lieutenant Morrison stood by the door like a jailer. Please sit, De Silva said. They sat. Emma's hands clenched in her lap. Nietzsche remained perfectly still. I've received disturbing news from the territorial capital, De Silva continued. It seems someone has been making allegations to newspapers, claiming irregularities in the documentation surrounding your marriage and the Aravaipa incident. Emma forced herself to breathe normally. These allegations suggest that documents may have been forged. that you were both falsely implicated in intelligence sharing that led to military action. De Silva's eyes were cold. They further suggest a conspiracy reaching the territorial government. Those are serious allegations, Emma said carefully. Very serious. So serious that Governor Safford has ordered an investigation. De Silva paused. Into you. Emma's blood went cold. The investigation will examine whether you stole classified documents from official archives, whether you falsified copies of legitimate evidence, whether you're attempting to manufacture innocence through fraud. De Silva leaned forward. The penalty for such actions is 10 years territorial prison, each. Morrison stepped forward, placing papers on the desk. These are summons to appear before a territorial magistrate next week. You'll be questioned under oath about the documents sent to the Arizona citizen. You'll be required to explain how you obtained them. And if you can't provide satisfactory answers, we'll be convicted of crimes we didn't commit to cover up crimes someone else did, Nietzsche finished. That's one interpretation, De Silva said. Another is that you're guilty of exactly what the evidence suggests, and you're trying to escape consequences through manipulation of public opinion. And the third interpretation? Emma asked. That we're innocent, and someone very powerful is desperate to keep us quiet? That interpretation, De Silva replied, requires believing in conspiracy at the highest levels of territorial government. It requires accepting that federal document authentication can be fooled. It requires trusting the word of a civilian clerk and an Apache scout over the sworn testimony of military officers and government officials. He paused. Which interpretation do you think a territorial magistrate will find more credible? None. The answer was none. The system was designed to protect itself, and they were outsiders attacking its foundations. What do you want from us? Emma asked. Cooperation. Withdrawal of your allegations. A statement to the Arizona citizen admitting you were mistaken, that you misunderstood the documents, that you accept full responsibility for rewrote. De Silva's voice was almost gentle. Do this, and the investigation ends. You'll be quietly reassigned. Far from here. New names if you want them. A chance to start over. And if we refuse? Then the investigation proceeds. You're convicted of document theft and fraud. You serve your sentences in separate facilities. You in territorial women's prison. Nietzsche in a military stockade. And when you're eventually released, you'll both be marked as convicted criminals who tried to blame others for your own treasonous actions. It was the ultimate trap. Confess to crimes they didn't commit and disappear quietly, or maintain innocence and be destroyed publicly. Can we have time to consider? Emma asked. You have until Monday, De Silva said. Prepare your statement, or prepare for trial. Your choice. Outside, Emma and Nietzsche walked back to their cabin in silence. The camp bustled around them, soldiers drilling, horses being exercised, the normal rhythms of military life indifferent to their crisis. We can't confess, Emma said once they were alone. If we do, the truth about rewrote stays buried. 23 deaths become justified collateral damage instead of murder. If we don't confess, we're convicted and silenced anyway, Nietzsche replied. Prison is just slower execution. Unless the newspaper publishes before Monday. Unless public pressure forces real investigation. You're assuming the newspaper will publish at all. We sent documents 3 days ago. No response. No article. Nothing. He was right. Their desperate gambit might have already failed. Emma sat down, suddenly exhausted. I'm sorry. I got you into this. If I'd just stayed quiet, I'd still be framed for guiding soldiers to murder people I knew, Nietzsche interrupted. The trap was already built. You just tried to escape it. And made everything worse. Or created the only chance we have. Nietzsche knelt beside her chair. Emma, listen. We knew this was dangerous. We knew powerful people would fight back. But fighting was still the right choice. Even if we lose? Especially if we lose. His voice was fierce. Because losing while fighting means they have to work to destroy us. Means leaving evidence of their effort. Means maybe, eventually, Someone looks at how hard they fought and asks why. Emma met his eyes, saw determination there, and something else. Something that looked like respect. Maybe even more. "When did you start believing in this?" she asked. "In fighting, knowing we'll probably lose?" "When I watched you refuse to be quiet even though silence would have been safer," Nietzsche replied. "When I saw someone choose truth over survival." They were inches apart. Close enough that Emma could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. Close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. The moment stretched. Charged with something neither of them had words for. Then a knock at the door shattered it. They sprang apart. Nietzsche answered. Patterson stood outside, looking terrified. "They questioned me. About the documents. Morrison knows I took them." "Come inside," Emma said quickly. Patterson stumbled in. "They threatened my family. Said I could be court-martialed for theft of military property. That my children would be left destitute." "I'm sorry," Emma said. "I never wanted—" "But I didn't confess," Patterson interrupted. "I told them I had authorization to cross-reference records. That I was following proper procedures. I stonewalled for 3 hours until they finally let me go." Emma stared. "Why would you do that? You could have blamed us. Saved yourself." "Because you were right," Patterson said. "About everything. About the forgery. About the conspiracy." He pulled out a folded paper. "And because I found this, while they were questioning me. Hidden in Harris's desk. I took it when Morrison stepped out." He handed the paper to Emma. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. It was a carbon copy of one of the forged letters. But this one had notations in the margins, corrections, practice attempts at her signature. And at the bottom, a note in different handwriting. "Final version approved by Governor's office. Proceed with authentication." Proof. Actual undeniable proof that the letters were forgeries created with government knowledge. "This is it," Emma whispered. "This proves everything." "There's more," Patterson said. "I know where Harris keeps the authentication records. The Federal Examiner's reports on document analysis. If we can get those, we can prove the whole chain of fraud." "When can you access them?" "Tonight. Harris always leaves by 6. I have keys to the administration building for after-hours filing. I can get in, copy the records, and be out before anyone notices." "It's too dangerous," Nietzsche said. "If you're caught—" "I'm already caught," Patterson replied. "Morrison suspects me. It's only a matter of time before he finds proof. At least this way, I go down fighting for something that matters." "We'll help," Emma said. "No. If all 3 of us are arrested, who's left to get the evidence out?" Patterson shook his head. "You two stay here. Maintain innocence. If I succeed, I'll bring the documents at dawn. If I don't—" He stopped. "Take care of my family. Promise me." "I promise," Emma said. Patterson left. The cabin felt hollow without him. "He's going to die doing this," Nietzsche said quietly. "Maybe. But he's right that someone has to try." They waited through the night. Emma couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Just paced while Nietzsche watched her with eyes that saw too much. At 4 in the morning, gunshots shattered the darkness. Emma and Nietzsche ran outside. Other cabins emptying too. Soldiers scrambling toward the administration building. They found Patterson in the hallway outside Harris's office. Blood pooling beneath him. Documents scattered around his body. Morrison stood over him with a smoking pistol. Caught him breaking into official files. Ordered him to stop. He refused and threatened me. I defended myself. It was lies. Obviously lies. But lies backed by a lieutenant's testimony and a dead clerk's silence. Emma pushed through the crowd, dropped to her knees beside Patterson. He was still breathing. Barely. "Patterson, stay with me." She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. His eyes focused on her. He tried to speak. "Don't. Save your strength." But Patterson grabbed her hand, pressed something into it. "Authenticated," he whispered. "Original. Examiner report. They paid him." Then his eyes went empty. Emma closed his fist around whatever he'd given her. Stood slowly. "This man was murdered," she said, voice ringing across the crowd. He found evidence of government fraud and was killed to silence him. This man was a thief who attacked an officer, Morrison replied. Witnesses will confirm it. What witnesses? You were alone with him. I have testimony from soldiers who saw him enter the building illegally. Morrison gestured, and 2 soldiers stepped forward, nodding. Lies. All lies. But lies. That would be recorded as truth. Emma looked down at her closed fist. At the evidence Patterson had died to give her. At the price one man had paid for caring about justice. Then she looked at Morrison. At De Silva, who'd arrived and was watching with calculating eyes. At the system that killed anyone who threatened its carefully constructed narratives. And she made a choice. I wrote the letters, Emma said clearly. All of them. I provided intelligence about Apache positions. I helped plan the attack on Aravaipa. Nietzsche was my accomplice. We're both guilty. Nietzsche turned to her, shock on his face. Emma, no. We confess to everything, Emma continued. We take full responsibility. We'll sign whatever statements you want. We'll do whatever you say. Emma, don't. Under one condition, Emma said, louder now, speaking to De Silva. You guarantee Patterson's family receives his full pension and benefits. You list him as killed in the line of duty, not as a criminal. You make sure his children are cared for. De Silva considered this. And in exchange? We disappear. We confess. We let you write whatever history you want. We become the guilty parties who validate your whole false narrative. Emma, Nietzsche said desperately. We have evidence. Evidence that died with Patterson, Emma interrupted, praying he'd understand. That he'd feel the small object she'd palmed and was now sliding into his hand while pretending to reach for his arm. We have nothing. Only confession. Nietzsche felt the paper. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He closed his hand around it. I don't confess, he said. I'm innocent. You'll confess, Morrison said coldly, or you'll be tried for murder. Patterson's murder. We have witnesses who'll say you ordered this break-in, that you sent him to steal documents, that you're responsible for his death. Another trap. Always another trap. But Emma had given Nietzsche something. Something Patterson had died protecting. Something small enough to hide, crucial enough to matter. Fine, Nietzsche said. I confess to Aravaipa, but not to this. Patterson's death is on your hands alone. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But it kept Nietzsche separate from this latest murder. Kept him from being executed for killing the man who'd tried to help them. Draw up the confessions, Emma said. We'll sign them in the morning. You'll sign them now, De Silva replied, before you change your minds. So they did. In that hallway, with Patterson's body cooling beside them and blood still wet on the floor, they signed confessions to crimes they didn't commit. Became officially, legally, permanently guilty of planning and executing the Aravaipa massacre. The system had won. Truth was dead. Justice was theater. But as Emma signed her name one final time, she saw Nietzsche's hand move subtly to his boot. Saw him hide whatever Patterson had died to protect. Evidence. Still alive. Still dangerous. Still possible. They were taken immediately to separate cells in the military stockade. Emma in the civilian section. Nietzsche in the military wing. No contact, no communication. Complete isolation designed to prevent coordination or hope. Emma lay on the hard bunk and thought about Patterson's children waking up to find their father dead. About his wife receiving news that would reshape her whole world. About how quickly a life could be destroyed by choosing the wrong side of truth. 3 days passed. No word. No visitors. Nothing but silence and the certainty that they'd failed completely. On the 4th day, a guard brought her a newspaper. The Arizona Citizen. Front page headline: Government forgery scandal. Federal examiner admits falsifying document authentication. Emma read with shaking hands. The article detailed how a federal document examiner named Holbrook had been paid to authenticate forged letters as genuine. How he'd altered his official reports to support false evidence. How he'd finally confessed to a reporter after months of guilt. The article included quotes from Holbrook describing the forgeries, explaining how they'd been created, revealing that he'd been approached by territorial officials, including Governor Safford's office, to provide false authentication, and it included copies of the original authentication reports, before and after alteration, showing exactly how truth had been manufactured. Patterson's final gift: the authenticated examiner report, the proof of fraud at the highest levels. He'd managed to get it to the newspaper before Morrison killed him, had held on to it long enough to pass it to Emma, had died knowing his evidence might survive even if he didn't. The article concluded by demanding federal investigation into the Aravaipa massacre, the forced marriage of Emma Fairchild and Nietzsche, and the recent killing of civilian clerk Patterson. It demanded truth, justice, accountability. Emma read it 3 times. Then she pressed the newspaper to her chest and wept. For Patterson. For the innocent dead at Aravaipa. For truth that had cost so much to speak. For hope that maybe, possibly, it had mattered. The federal investigation took 6 months. 6 months of Emma and Nietzsche held in separate custody, while prosecutors from Washington interviewed witnesses, reviewed documents, reconstructed the conspiracy that had framed them. What they found was worse than Emma had imagined. Aravaipa hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been part of a coordinated plan by territorial officials and land speculators to eliminate Apache from valuable mining regions. Governor Safford's office had orchestrated multiple attacks, using military forces to clear land that was then sold to private interests. Harris, the correspondence clerk, had created dozens of forged documents over 2 years. False treaties, fake intelligence reports, manufactured evidence of Apache hostility, used to justify military action. The forced marriage between Emma and Nietzsche had been specifically designed to create a legal framework that prevented them from testifying against the government. Married to each other, they became single witnesses instead of corroborating parties. Their confession under duress provided cover for the real perpetrators. And Patterson's murder had been just one of many. 12 people who'd discovered pieces of the conspiracy had died in accidents or conflicts over the preceding year. The trial was public, sensational, covered by newspapers across the country. Governor Safford was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. Harris of forgery and fraud. Morrison of murder. De Silva of obstruction of justice. 15 territorial and military officials were imprisoned. The Aravaipa massacre was officially declared an illegal military action. Reparations were ordered for survivors, and Emma and Nietzsche were exonerated, completely, publicly, with formal apologies from the federal government. But exoneration didn't resurrect Patterson, didn't restore the dead from Aravaipa, didn't undo the months of believing they were criminals. "What do we do now?" Emma asked Nietzsche on the day of their release. They stood together outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters shouting questions, but somehow alone in the chaos. "I don't know," Nietzsche admitted. "Our marriage was forced. The foundation was lies. We're free to end it now. Go separate ways." "Is that what you want?" Nietzsche looked at her. Really looked, the way he had that first night when they'd decided to fight together instead of surrender separately. "I want whatever is true. Whatever is chosen freely, not imposed by others." Emma understood. They'd been victims, then partners, then weapons used against their own innocence. But what were they now, when all the external pressure was gone? "I want to choose you," Emma said quietly. "Not because I'm forced, not because it's strategic, but because in the worst moments of my life, you were the one person I could trust completely." "I want to choose you too," Nietzsche replied. "Because you saw truth and refused to look away even when it would have been safer. Because you're the kind of partner I want beside me in whatever future we build." They were married again 2 months later. Not in a camp chapel under gunpoint, but in a small ceremony attended by Patterson's widow and children, by 2 bears and other Aravaipa survivors, by the reporter who'd broken the story and the federal prosecutor who'd believed them. This marriage was real, chosen, built on foundation of tested trust rather than manufactured guilt. "Do you think Patterson knows?" Emma asked Nietzsche that evening, watching sunset paint the mountains gold. "That his death meant something?" "I think he knew before he died," Nietzsche replied. "He made a choice. He died free, even if his body was trapped." Emma thought about that, about how freedom was sometimes just the ability to choose which battles to fight, even knowing you might lose. They tried to make me the criminal, she said. Tried to take my witness of murder and rewrite it as my guilt. Make my marriage proof of my crime. They did the same to me, Nietzsche replied. Made my name the signature on massacre. Made my honor the seal of their lies. But they failed. Because we fought. Because Patterson fought. Because truth, even when it costs everything, still matters. Emma leaned against him. Felt the solid warmth of someone who'd chosen to stand beside her when standing beside her meant risking death. What do we do now? She asked. The investigation is over. The guilty are punished. Where do we go from here? Nietzsche was quiet for a moment. We tell the story. We make certain what happened at Aravaipa, what happened to us, what happened to Patterson. We make certain it's remembered. Not the lies they tried to write. The truth. Who'll listen? Someone will. Someone always does. And if enough people listen, maybe next time it's harder to forge that signature. Harder to kill those witnesses. Harder to turn truth into crime. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough to restore the dead or undo the trauma. But it was something. A purpose. A reason to keep fighting. Emma and Nietzsche spent the next decade traveling, speaking, writing. They documented the Aravaipa massacre and the conspiracy that had tried to hide it. They testified before Congress about military abuse and territorial corruption. They became voices for those who'd been silenced. The work was difficult, often dangerous. Some people hated them for it, tried to discredit their testimony, question their motives, accuse them of lying even after courts had proven their innocence. But other people listened, believed, changed. Slowly, painfully, systems shifted. Oversight increased. Documentation requirements tightened. The casual murder of inconvenient witnesses became slightly harder to accomplish and hide. Not enough. Never enough. But something. 30 years after that forced marriage in Camp Grant's chapel, Emma and Nietzsche returned to Arizona territory for the dedication of a memorial at Aravaipa Creek. 23 names carved in stone. Patterson's name included among them, honored as one who died fighting the same injustice. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd just accepted it? Emma asked. Stayed quiet. Let them make us guilty. Disappeared like they wanted? Sometimes, Nietzsche admitted. But then I remember, being alive isn't the same as being free. They could have kept our bodies safe and destroyed our souls. Instead, we kept our souls and risked everything else. Was it worth it? Ask me that again in another 30 years. Emma smiled. Deal. They never did get to have that conversation. Emma died at 68 from pneumonia. Nietzsche survived her by 7 years, spending them writing the final volume of their shared story. A detailed account of government conspiracy, manufactured guilt, and the price paid for choosing truth over survival. The book was published 2 months before his death. It became required reading in law schools, studying evidence fabrication and witness intimidation. Defense attorneys cited it in cases of government overreach. Historians referenced it in studies of frontier justice and territorial corruption. And every year, on the anniversary of the Aravaipa massacre, someone left flowers at the memorial. 23 names, one choice. The decision to remember truth even when lies were easier. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think about how easily systems can transform witnesses into criminals, how marriage can become a weapon, how truth requires fighting for even when the fight seems hopeless, then don't forget to subscribe. These histories matter, these voices matter, and remembering them is how we prevent the same patterns from crushing new generations. Patterson died for truth. The 23 at Aravaipa died from lies. Emma and Nietzsche survived to tell both stories. Make certain someone's still listening.